I always look so surprised. Hello. Welcome. Welcome everyone to Coffee with Lilli. On this beautiful Friday, I'm gearing up for yet another retreat in the month of June. It's been a little bit of an overextension of myself, but in the best ways, and I've been taking time to realign, taking very important realigning practices, just to make sure that I don't get way too far off of my center. I thought today that we would talk a little bit about triggers. I had something happen to me recently with someone that I'm in contact with, not personally but professionally, but it made me think a lot about our relationship with triggers. And maybe a new way to think about it, maybe an old way, or maybe a refresher, wherever you are in your journey. First of all, I think that it's important maybe to reframe and to rethink about our relationship with triggers. If you're always triggered, which is, I understand that's the way I used to be. I felt like kind of always like I was on the defense or on guard, or I don't know, I kind of always felt like I didn't really, like I knew something was wrong at the time, but I just didn't feel like myself. Like I was either always activated or I was always depressed. And there was a very rare times when I was kind of middle ground, which is, if you follow me for a while, that's what I talk about with alignment, as this crazy new way, surprisingly beautiful way of being, that we can actually be alive and aligned. So I think maybe it's important to have a different relationship, if we can, with our triggers, and be curious about, and that's part of what I want to talk about today too, is to be curious about what is this trigger that we're having? What is it telling us about ourselves? How can we have a different relationship with this? And kind of as a baseline point, let's kind of try to define what a trigger is. So for me, a trigger is when you're kind of snapped out of your current reality. Some people call it a flashback. And if that is, it's really kind of on the PTSD side of things, or PTSR response. But really, it's kind of a point where you're really either really activated, something like really sends you into stress and anxiety, or it really kind of triggers you into that downward shame spiral into depression. But it's really that point when you're activated, or whatever happens to you in your life that kind of sends you into either of those directions. So let's just define that as that for now. And if you have a different definition that helps you a little bit better, please feel free to insert that and what works for you. But something to think about with triggers is that I've come to have a very good relationship. And these days, I really don't get triggered as much as I used to. Normally, it had to do with people and about how people treated me and how they made me feel. For me, one of my core wounds is not being seen and heard and understood. So there are a lot of instances out there, especially when we're in contact with a lot of people on a daily basis, where I was triggered and I didn't really understand. Obviously, it was something that I didn't want, but I really didn't understand what it meant about me. Really, I would just run away. I was a classic avoidant, or sometimes I was a disorganized attacher. You triggered me, but I really want love, so I'm going to come back to you, even though it may be bullshit and I really shouldn't do that. That was my 8-year relationship, by the way. But something to think about. The next time you're triggered, my invitation for you is to think about, for me, the way that I see my triggers now is that I see them as an unmet need. An unmet need. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you a few examples, I think, today, maybe. So many of you know that I bought a new house, and of course, things are going wrong, and I'm trying to elicit my dad's help. My dad has always been kind of that. He's very, he's kind of always been that trigger for me. And we were FaceTiming, and he was like, it had to do with the shower. So the shower was on and it's really loud, and I was trying to show him, and I was getting frustrated, and he's like, show it to me. At least I felt like that he was yelling in my ear, and I got really triggered. I got really, really triggered because I really felt like that he was yelling at me in my face. And this happened just a couple weeks ago. But after I reevaluated that, and like a unhealthy, not the situation and the place that I'm in now, but if I was in another place in my life, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that really would have sent me into a very, just that little thing would have probably sent me into an anxious spiral. And I would have been really depressed because I had a core caregiver that was yelling at me, or at least I felt like it. If I talked to him about it, he may not have been. But I reevaluated after that, and the way that I look at those things now is I try to understand what was it about me? What are my unmet needs? Maybe not present day, but my unmet needs as a younger child when I felt like that I wasn't being seen or heard or understood. And that's why I feel like that our triggers are time travelers. They take us back to maybe a core wound, maybe a secondary wound, maybe a third wound. I mean, we've got layers here, right? But they take us back to places that we haven't been, whatever it is that we need. For me, it was nurturing. It was emotional support. It was being seen and heard and understood. So in that moment when that happened a couple weeks ago, I became like a 5-year-old little girl who was scared because his daddy or her daddy was yelling at her. And just that different relationship that I've had with that awareness of noticing my triggers and trying to understand them, I can take them a step further and send love and compassion to that part of myself that really wants to be whatever it is, seen and understood, and give her what she needs. If you're in the kind of the mental health space, it's like reparenting yourself, right? And I moved through that instance a couple weeks ago really smoothly and really easily. And that trigger lasted for maybe 5 minutes when it probably would have sent me, all day I may have been depressed. I don't know. Another thing that happened to me actually yesterday is a prospective client reached out. She was triggered by one of the forms on my page for my application for my program that has that's open right now. And we had a little chat about it. We're not done talking about it, but it just made me think, how many times, so I'll give a little bit more information about that. She was filling out my form and she was triggered by, I think, a piece of the language in it. And I have obviously, I have reasons for the way that I present my program. It's the first time that I've ever really heard this feedback, and I'm obviously open to receive that feedback, and I appreciate that for sure. But it also made me think, how many times have our triggers held us back from moving forward with good intention and good shit for growth, for personal development, for spiritual wealth, to being alive, So if we can have a different relationship with her, the soul-centered part of me really wants to coach her and be like, I understand where you're coming from, but let's have a look. Let's have a look at what's going on with you, or this is so triggering for you that you don't want to move forward with something fucking beautiful and great, right? So I feel like if we start to have a different relationship to when we are triggered, we can start to move forward, not move through, but move forward and be friends with that part of that's triggered. Because really, a trigger is a time traveler. It takes us back to a younger part of ourselves that hasn't had a need met. So if we can meet that need present day as adults, as in our 20s, in our 30s, in our 40s, in our 50s, then we begin to have a different relationship with that part of ourselves. And that part is a part of us. It's not a part that we can just set aside and throw away or push through or push down and not love. So the only way to love every single part of ourselves is to really to be to have a different relationship with it, to be curious, to be loving, to be compassionate. I hope that helps. So next time you're triggered, have a different look. That really helps with me. And it also helps, obviously, that I have a great support system. If you follow me for a little bit, you also know that I do have a massive support squad behind me. So if it comes to a point where I can't really work that through on my own through self-regulation, I turn to co-regulation to help me self-regulate again. I hope that helps. I have one opening left also in Align into Authenticity. My coaching program is open until June 23rd or until this spot is full. So if you are at this point looking for help and support, I would love to chat with you on a complimentary call. Just check my bio and you can pick a time. I'd love to meet you. Bye, y'all.